Section 4 of George Castriot, surnamed Scanderbeg, King of Albania, Books 1 through 3, by Marin Barleti and Jacques de la Vardin, translated by Zachary Jones and Clement Clark Moore. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Alistair. Book 2, Part 2. After the defeat of the Turks under Karim Bey at the Battle of Morava, and this victory obtained by Skanderbeg over Ali Pasha, the Christians of Hungary and Poland, aided by Pope Eugenius and Philip, Duke of Burgundy, deemed the time favourable for an attack upon the power of the Turks, with the view of rescuing Christendom from their dominion. A letter was accordingly addressed to Skanderbeg by Ulaszlo, King of Hungary and Poland, in the following terms. Ulaszlo, King of Hungary and Polonia, and to the noble Skanderbeg, Prince of Epirus, greeting. It may be that some good hap hath deferred this our late congratulation until this present, to the intent we might at this time, together with you, rejoice in the double success of your prosperity. First, for the happy recovery of your estate, and then for that the same hath, by your wisdom and valour, of late been so notably defended. Wherefore in this we rejoice, not only in your behalf, but in the behalf of all good Christians, that it hath pleased God in his goodness, by your valour, to have given so great an increase and comfort unto the Christian commonwealth. Forasmuch as amongst others our great evils, the loss of the Albanian people hath not been to be accounted the least, at such time as John Castriot, a worthy prince your father, oppressed by Amurath, and by the ungrateful destinies taken out of this world, had neither the means to leave unto you his kingdom and sceptre, as unto his son, then living in his enemy's power, neither was able yet otherwise to provide for his affairs. And would to God this your father, most happy in such a son, might have till now lived, whose felicity had in that surmounted all others, if he might have seen you before his death. For, as you seem unto me above all other princes in the world, without offence be it said, most accomplished with all the good graces and perfections of both body and mind, so you are endowed with a certain divine and wonderful fortune, under the good conduct whereof not only the whole kingdom of Epirus may think itself in security, but all the rest of the other nations also, lately by the detestable fraud and violence of the Ottoman kings dismembered from the realm of Macedon, may also recover the former beauty of their ancient laws and liberties. For, to say nothing of those things which, even from your childhood, having continually made you envied, have heretofore purchased unto you an immortal fame and glory even amongst the barbarians themselves. What can be more glorious than this victory which, as we have heard and believe, you to your singular admiration have obtained, by the overthrow and utter discomfiture of Ali Pasha, with his so great and mighty a power? But now, O Skanderbeg, God so appointing it who, in his deep and secret wisdom, hath reserved you unto these dangerous times, for the public good and comfort of the Christian commonwealth, there offers itself unto you an object of far greater glory, with a fair and fit occasion for you to revenge yourself of all the wrongs and injuries, both new and old, by Amurath, the Turkish Sultan, done not in private to the person of yourself only, but unto the whole state and kingdom of Epirus also, and not the domestical and civil miseries of your country only, but the public calamities also, and those opprobrious disgraces done against the Christian faith and religion in general, now oppressed. I will not say extinguished. And that is, if you, with your victorious forces, will succour us in this extremity of our affairs, not yet altogether desperate. Hereunto do old princes of Hungary and Polonia, and all other men of courage, invite you. Julian, the Cardinal of Sant Angel, entreateth you, with all those devout and courageous Christians, which long since here with us, and ready in arms, wish for nothing more than the presence of your victorious ensigns, which so fair an occasion, by God himself, now offered, if you refuse not, will, in all men's judgment, be a sure mean to vanquish and overthrow our common enemy, the Turk, and to drive him quite out of Europe, wrongfully by him of so long time possessed. I need not, therefore, as I suppose, to use any kind of persuasion unto you in this cause and quarrel, the defence whereof doth purchase unto us health, light, and liberty. But being neglected, I fear and abhor to forebode what may ensue thereof. We Christians have been too slack and backward in helping one another. The flame hath now well near consumed us all, whilst no man thought it would have come near himself. What do we see of the Greek Empire? What of the Bulgarians and Servians? Ye, mine own losses and many calamities already, and yet also to be endured, who is able to recount? The brave and most valiant princes, the surest bulwarks and defences of the kingdom of Hungary, from time to time lost, and the puissant armies, with one and the same fatal chance of war, consumed and brought to nothing. Who is able to reckon up? Insomuch that there is no house, no wife, no matron in all of Hungary, which is not in some measure partaker of this heaviness. All this do the Christian princes hear of, and yet the miserable estate and condition of their allies can nothing move any one of them, but suffer us thus, as a sacrifice for the rest, to be on all parts exposed to the rage and fury of the common and merciless enemy. Only Eugenius, the most holy Bishop of Rome, and Philip, Duke of Burgundy, have not refused to bear a part of the burden of this our afflicted fortune. The one has sent hither his legate Julian, the Cardinal, with notable and puissant succours, and the other with his fleet at sea, and come as far as Hellespontus, so much as in him lieth, doth notably hinder the Turk's passage into Europe. And one other hope there is, not now far from us, and that is your help, whereof we are so desirous, which we require of you, moved thereunto partly by your valour so well known, and partly in regard of the imminent peril and common danger of us all. And albeit we are not ignorant how evil you may be at leisure to take such an expedition in hand, for the late troubled estate of your affairs, and your new recovered kingdom, as yet scarcely established, yet notwithstanding, let it not withhold you, or keep you back, assuring you that as this expedition cannot be but unto you most honourable, even so this your present desert shall not be bestowed upon ungrateful and thankless men, but that which you shall now first begin and undertake for our preservation and dignity, we will from henceforth and ever continue for your glory and for the increase of your greatness. Fare you well from our regal city of Buda, the 4th of July, 1444. Textual note. Lavardin says 1443. Textual note end. Ali Pasha had by this time returned with the remains of his defeated army to Amurath, who was already acquainted with the disaster which had befallen the forces sent into Epire. The Pasha excused himself to the Sultan in the best manner that he could, calling his soldiers to witness that he had omitted nothing which became a good general, and that he had been wanting in nothing towards them, nor they towards him, but that the defeat should be attributed to the fortune of war. He entreated Amurath to make another attempt, assuring him that he would pursue measures which should change the fortune of Skanderbeg. To this counsel of Hali Pasha the Sultan was inclined to listen, but other counsellors, particularly Kali Pasha, persuaded him that while the attack on Epire might with safety be deferred, the affairs of Hungary required his immediate attention. The letter of the King of Hungary appeared to Skanderbeg so just and reasonable that he felt fully disposed to lend the aid required of him. He would not, however, act without the advice of those who, on all occasions, acted with him. Accordingly, his chieftains being called together, the letter of Olaszlo was read in full council. There was no one present who did not approve of the measure proposed, through fear of the increasing greatness of the Ottoman power, the most effectual check to which appeared to be the valour and fortune of the Hungarians, whose downfall before Amurath would lead to universal desolation, and because it was deemed of the utmost importance to secure the friendship and alliance of so great a king. Wherefore it was determined unanimously that succours should be sent to him. But there was a great diversity of opinion as to the number of forces which should be sent, and whether it was expedient that Skanderbeg should in person lead his army abroad, or remain and take care of his own dominions. Although the mind of the prince was decided upon this subject, and remained unaltered, he was unwilling to use his influence one way or the other, and he remained silent. At length an end was made of the discussion by the vehement earnestness of Prince Paul Ducagin, who addressed to them a speech, in which he freely declared that he was most inclined not to send any succours at all, but that they should bend all their force and attention to the defence and preservation of their own country. He, however, maintained that it would be altogether vain and improper, if they did take part in the Hungarian war, not to send an efficient force. "Shall Skanderbeg," said he, "be so meanly accompanied into the midst of the Varnian fields, where all men in general do attend and wish for him? Shall so many princes and great lords of Hungary and of the Christian army see your chief and sovereign, whose glorious renown is now dispersed and gone into all parts before him, shall he, I say, be seen marching before a handful of men, no otherwise than as one accompanied with so many thieves and robbers?" With regard to the question whether Skanderbeg should remain at home, or lead his forces in person, he exclaimed, "What! Shall we send these triumphant succours unto the Hungarians without Skanderbeg, whose only name will yield them more succour than if all of us were with them, and he absent, whom they especially do invite, and whom all of them do demand and seek after? As touching Skanderbeg, there is not any one of you but will confess that it is more easy for you to find a man to govern you in peace and to administer justice than to conduct and lead soldiers marching with their arms. But to the intent you may not think that in this discourse I bring you nothing but great and glorious words. Behold, here I am, who do offer myself with 5,000 men to the war of Hungary, and, if need be, do vow and consecrate my life for the service of Jesus Christ, principally, and next for the glory and reputation of you all, and for Skanderbeg, his honour, name, and dignity." To use the words and orthography of Lavardin's translator, this round and sharp oration of Ducagin, and the liberal offer of his pains and labour, together with the great authority which the man had with all the princes of Epire, and with Skanderbeg especially, did soon work a change and alteration in their minds and opinions. Skanderbeg himself was the first that approved his devise, and after he had recounted and numbered up his merits, and worthy acts in the whole course of his life before past, he said that there was not any one besides him in all the company that had spoken rightly, and for the reputation of them in general. And he did oftentimes repeat it, that most happy and fortunate should the estate of Albany be, if it had many such men of like devotion. This Paul, as we have said, was one of the most puissant and noblest princes of Epire, and amongst other his virtuous conditions, he was most singularly commended for a certain true, unfeigned, and perfect zeal in religion, and was held in high accompt and the estimate amongst all men, being descended out of that honourable family, from which very many most famous and warlike captains had been descended, and especially Nicholas, son of the said Paul, who far surpassed and excelled all his forefathers and ancestors in the honour and renown of arms. Of this man there is yet at this day extant and remaining in Peneropole, a town of Thrace by the inhabitants called Persera, a notable monument or mark of his excellent virtue, and of the strength of his arm, if I may so term it, immortal. And that is the relics or pieces of an enemy's target, the which in a certain fight of late, whereof the memory is yet but new and fresh, he did with one only blow of his scimitary cut quite in sunder from one side thereof to the other, that the hand of the barbarian holding it, then in fight, was so maimed as from thenceforward he was never able to use it any more in the wars. The whole command and ordering of the expedition was committed to Skanderbeg, who, before he commenced the levy of his forces, dispatched the Hungarian messenger with the following letter. Skanderbeg, Prince of the Epirots, unto you Laszlo, King of Hungary and Polonia, greeting. Your letters, most invincible King, I have with joy and contentment received, which I, in the general assembly of my chieftains, having caused publicly to be read, there was not any one of them which was not of the opinion but that so just an occasion of war by you offered was forthwith to be joyfully, on our behalf, also embraced. And so every man doth both publicly and privately affirm that nothing could have happened unto them more acceptable from God than that they might, by some notable service, testify their grateful minds, and bind unto them so excellent a prince, as also to give so fit succours unto the Christian commonwealth. In which forwardness of my people I myself took great contentment and pleasure, both in regard of yourself and in the behalf of the public and common cause, seeing my men of war, and all my other subjects, of what state or degree soever, without any persuasion used on my part, to be so cheerfully and courageously minded in the defence of the faith and of the Christian religion, and so well affectioned to your most royal majesty. And to say the truth, who is he, if he be not hateful unto God and man, albeit there were no question of religion, or of the common danger, that would refuse so just and lawful a war? For such a king, as unto whom alone we may and ought to attribute that we Christians do not only reign, but even live, breathe, and enjoy the liberty of our speech, who would not willingly take up arms and adventure himself into the most manifest and certain danger for the people of Hungary, by whom in all ages the Christian commonwealth hath, with their so many travels and so much of their blood, been so mightily supported and defended, who even from the very cradle have been the continual enemies of our enemies, and have, as it were, even vowed themselves for the honour of the Christian religion and name. Would God, most mighty and redoubted Ulaslo, it had been in my power to have brought unto you such forces to this honourable war as were answerable to my courage and desire. Then happily Europe should no longer lie in this ignominious estate, oppressed by Amurath. Neither should the fields of Varna or Basilia so often smoke with the blood of Hungarians, nor every corner of Macedonia with the blood of Epirotes, both nations being, as it were, become the expiatory sacrifices of others' sins and offences. We all now by turns perish, whilst every man thinketh himself born but for himself alone. But why do I unto myself pour forth these vain complaints? Truly, it neither repenteth me of my forces, as I suppose, if it shall please God, that our forces might once meet and join together in so happy a war. Neither shall the Christian commonwealth have any cause to sorrow, or be aggrieved with the issue and event of our fortune. For unto those 15,000 good soldiers which lately discomfited Alice Pasha on the borders of Macedonia, my purpose is to join as many more unto them, with all which strength, as soon as conveniently they may, I will begin to set forward, ready to follow your ensigns to all events whatsoever. And so fare you well, from Croya, the 3rd of August, 1444. Textual note. Lavardin says 1443. Textual note end. When Skanderbeg had sent this letter to the King of Hungary, he turned all his attention to the levying of forces. The troops which had served against Hali Pasha he reinforced with new supplies, and ordered them all to the war. He soon raised and enrolled 10,000 more. Paul DuCange, in conformity with the offer made by him, presented himself among the foremost, with 5,000 chosen men singularly well appointed. Whereupon the domestic affairs of the province were set in order, and its wants provided for. Skanderbeg reviewed his whole army, arranged it, and appointed officers to several corps. Public prayers were then offered up, and never did the people of Epire, who were always more inclined to arms than to religion, so importune the divine majesty with their prayers and supplications as they did at that time for the happy return of their soldiers, who were then to march out of their own country. All things, both human and divine, having thus been attended to, the army began its march. With great alacrity they had advanced their ensigns as far as the borders of Mysia, when their progress was checked by the refusal of George Branković, commonly called the despot of Servia, to suffer them to pass through his territories. This man was advanced in years, and without religion, making a mock of both the Christian and Mohammedan faith. He was inclined to favour the Turks, on account of the marriage of his daughter, Kathagosina, with Amurath, and because of his hatred of the Hungarians, especially against János Hunyadi, the despot of Transylvania, who was in possession of certain towns and places of Vervia, which he claimed for himself. Upon the approach of Skanderbeg to the borders of his territory, he caused all the passes to be guarded, so as to prevent the entrance of the Albanian army. Ambassadors were dispatched by Skanderbeg to remonstrate with the despot, and to threaten force if he refused to grant a passage through his country. But he remained deaf to the entreaties and threats of Skanderbeg, who, greatly against his inclination, and with a full conviction of the dangers and difficulties to which he should be exposed, resolved to put his threats into execution. But although he might doubtless have forced his way through the despot's territories, yet, during the delay occasioned by this unfriendly conduct of Branković, events occurred which rendered the good intention of the Epirotes towards the Hungarians vain and fruitless. Ulaszlo and his army, having marched through Wallachia and passed over the Danube, came to Varna, with the intention to unite their forces with those which were at sea, and thence pass into Romania. Footnote: the country of Varna is a champaign valley, beyond the confines of Mysia, upon the sea called Maggiore, 4 days' journey from Adrianople, between two promontories, upon one of which is seated Galata, on the other Macropolis. On the left of the valley where Galata stands is a large marsh. Footnote end. Amurath, being made acquainted with these movements of the Hungarians, was not at all dismayed, but having quickly repulsed the Caramanian and secured the country of Natolia, his only trouble and difficulty was how to transport his troops into Europe, as the sea was commanded by the fleet of the Bishop of Rome and the Duke of Burgundy. From which embarrassment, it is related, he was delivered by certain Genoese merchants upon the promise of a very great reward. it being stipulated that the army of the Turks should be transported across the Hellespont at the rate of a ducat for each man. The number of men thus transported was estimated at about 100,000, all Asiatics, as Amurath distrusted the faith of his European subjects. When his army had all passed the strait, he advanced with such rapidity that in less than 7 days he pitched his tents within 4 miles of the camp of the Christians, near to the city of Varna, by the ancients named Dionysiopolis. Upon the approach of the Turkish army, it was resolved by the Christians to hazard the event of a battle. The supreme command of the army was committed to Hunyadi, in the ordering of which he exerted and made proof of the skill and experience which he possessed in military affairs. As the description of this battle does not properly belong to the life of Skanderbeg, suffice it to say that, through the imprudent valour and impetuosity of King Ulaslo, in spite of the remonstrances of Hunyadi, the former was slain, and the latter taken prisoner by the despot of Servia, and by him put in irons and kept prisoner until the towns claimed by him were delivered up, and the Christian army was dispersed. This battle was fought on the feast of St. Martin's, the 11th of November, in the year 1443. Footnote: This shows the dates of the above letters of Ulaslo and Skanderbeg. Footnote end. The news of this defeat being conveyed to Skanderbeg, while he was yet upon the borders of Servia, caused him great grief and mortification. But that the conduct of the despot might not go unpunished, he broke into the country, and wasted it with fire and sword. Upon his return towards Epire, he gathered up many of the remains of the broken forces of the Hungarians, and, having supplied them with money and provisions, he also furnished them with vessels to convey them to Ragusa, whence they returned to their own homes. It would be rash, perhaps, to pronounce a judgment upon the conduct of Skanderbeg in this expedition, without the means of better information than can be obtained at this distance of time. But from all that can be learned, it would seem as if his usual prudence and foresight were not manifested in his setting out with so large an armament, and on so important an expedition, without having secured beforehand a free and open way for the march of his army. End of section 4.